When did you realize your teacher was a psychopath? I was in biology when the wasp stung me. I need an EpiPen, I gasped, already feeling the heat spread. Miss Brenner looked up from her phone. Stop being dramatic. No, you don't understand. I'll go into anaphylaxis. Your mother probably told you to fake this for attention. I know how you people operate. I wanted to call my mom, but all the students' phones were locked in the office during school hours. Katie raised her hand. Miss Brenner, she really needs help. I've seen her carry an EpiPen before. And where is this magical EpiPen now? Miss Brenner smirked. My stomach dropped. I left it at home, but there's one in the med cabinet. Of course you did. She walked over to the windows and cranked them wide open. Fresh air will help with your panic attack. That's when I saw it. A wasp nest, football-sized, hanging right outside our second-story window. We need to close those, David shouted. There's a nest. Mike and Anthony rushed to the windows, but Miss Brenner blocked them. These windows are painted shut on the bottom. Only the top portion opens, and I have the pole to close them. She held up the window pole, then tossed it in her desk drawer, locking it. The hives were spreading up my shoulder like tiny fire ants marching under my skin. I stood up to run for the door, but Miss Brenner moved faster than I'd ever seen her move. She grabbed the door handle and yanked hard. The whole handle came off in her hand. Oops, guess we're stuck until maintenance comes. What the freak? David shouted from the back. Language! Miss Brenner snapped. That's detention. My tongue felt thick, swollen. Pleth. I need help. You can't fool me. I know how your people lie, she said, pocketing the broken handle. 3 more wasps flew in through the open windows. One landed on Kevin's neck. He screamed and slapped at it. Another got Sophia. The room erupted in panic. Close the windows! 15 kids yelled at once. I told you, they're painted shut, Miss Brenner said, but she was smiling. One even landed on Miss Brenner's arm and stung her. She didn't even flinch. See? I'm fine. Leading by example. My chest felt like someone was sitting on it. The hives had spread to my face now and I could feel them. Raised welts that burned and itched so bad I was clawing at my skin until I felt blood under my fingernails. Oh my gosh, she's bleeding. Sarah started crying. Look at her face. Jamal ripped off his shirt and started fanning me. She can't breathe. Put your shirt on. That's inappropriate behavior, Miss Brenner screamed. 3 girls had formed a circle around me, trying to keep me calm. One was stroking my hair. Another was checking my pulse over and over. It's so fast. It's too fast. Miss Brenner stormed over to the thermostat and cranked up the heat. In the middle of summer, it was 100 degrees outside. Maybe if you all experience some discomfort, you'll stop enabling her performance. What is wrong with you? David was standing now, fists clenched. Everyone, please. Emma was sobbing. We need to break down the door. 6 kids started ramming their shoulders against it. Miss Brenner just laughed. Destruction of property. You're all getting expelled. My skin felt like it was too small for my body. Every inch of me was swollen, burning, screaming. That's when the whole class lost it. Kids were pounding on walls, screaming for help. Someone threw a textbook at the window, but it just bounced off. Kevin was holding his neck where he'd been stung, but he was still trying to pick the lock with a paperclip. Her lips are blue, Sarah screamed. Someone do something. Soon there was foam in my mouth that I couldn't swallow. My legs gave out and I hit the floor hard. Everyone was screaming at once. That's when Miss Brenner did something insane. She picked up a paperweight from her desk. You know what? Let's prove these are just normal wasps. She threw it straight at the nest outside. No! The entire class screamed. The nest exploded. Not just a few wasps, hundreds. A black cloud of fury heading straight for our open windows. I had seconds. Deodorant. In my backpack. I started crawling. My joints felt like they were full of broken glass. The first wasps were already entering. She's trying to get something, Katie yelled. Help her! Kids were diving under desks. The buzzing was so loud it drowned out everything else. Get back to your spot, Miss Brenner yelled, but even she was backing away from the windows now. Shut up! The whole class screamed it together. I used the desk to pull myself up. The screaming was deafening. 3 students helped steady me as I aimed at the smoke detector. I sprayed. Nothing. Kept spraying. Beep! The fire alarm went off. The last thing I heard was Miss Brenner screaming about how we were all faking it while wasps swarmed around her head. I woke up to paramedics over me. 17 students had been stung. Miss Brenner was screaming about mass hysteria while trying to explain why she'd thrown a rock at a wasp's nest. 3 kids had to be hospitalized because of her, and the whole time there was only one thing on my mind: destroying her. The gurney wheels squeaked against the hospital floor as they rushed me into the ER. The doctor's face appeared above me, checking my pupils with a pen light while calling out medical terms I didn't understand. Mom burst through the doors seconds later, her work clothes still on, mascara running down her cheeks. The doctor pulled her aside and I watched his hands move as he explained something serious. Mom's face went white. She grabbed my hand so hard her nails dug into my palm. The doctor came back and started checking my throat with a scope. He shook his head and wrote something on his clipboard. Mom asked him something and he nodded, pointing to marks on my neck. The rage from before started building in my chest again, not just at Miss Brenner, but at everything. The way she'd smiled while kids screamed. The way she'd thrown that rock like it was nothing. A man in a paramedic uniform walked in and Mom turned to look at him. It was Ash Ayala, the one who'd saved me. He had a folder in his hand and started talking to Mom about what he'd seen when they arrived. 17 kids with welts covering their arms and faces, 3 needing immediate transport, including me. Miss Brenner standing there claiming we were all faking for attention. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Mom. She took it and her jaw got tight the way it does when she's really mad but trying to stay calm. The doctor came back with more papers and started explaining about my oxygen levels dropping. He showed Mom the monitor where my heart rate kept jumping around. They wanted to keep me overnight for observation. Mom nodded and signed whatever they put in front of her. The doctor kept writing things down, measuring the welts on my arms, taking photos with a hospital camera. He told Mom this wasn't negligence. He used a different word. Mom asked him to write that down and he did, signing his name at the bottom. A nurse brought in a plastic bag with my stuff from the school. My phone was in there along with my backpack. I turned it on and the screen lit up with notification after notification. 47 texts in our class group chat. Katie had sent a video and my hands shook as I opened it. There was Miss Brenner, clear as day, picking up the paperweight and throwing it at the nest. David had gotten one too, showing her locking the door handle in her desk drawer after breaking it off. Sarah had photos of my face turning blue. Kevin had one of the thermostats showing 98 degrees. I forwarded everything to Mom's phone one by one. She watched them with her lips pressed into a thin line. That night they moved me to a regular room and Mom slept in the chair next to my bed. I woke up screaming about wasps in my hair, clawing at my scalp until Mom grabbed my hands. The AC unit kicked on and the buzzing sound made me panic. My heart monitor started beeping like crazy and nurses rushed in. Mom had to talk me through breathing exercises she Googled on her phone phone. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear that buzzing. Sleep became impossible. The next morning, Mom's phone rang while she was getting coffee from the machine down the hall. I answered it and heard Assistant Principal Kelsey Barron's voice. She started talking about an unfortunate incident and how the school was investigating. Mom came back and I put it on speaker. Barron kept using words like alleged and reviewing and asked us not to discuss anything publicly while they looked into it. Mom rolled her eyes at me and I mouthed a word that would have gotten me detention. Mom nodded and told Barron we'd be getting a lawyer. Barron's voice changed then, got higher, and she started talking faster about school policy and proper channels. Mom hung up on her. My phone was going crazy with messages from everyone in class. Sarah had made a shared Google Doc and everyone was adding their timeline of what happened. Who saw the rock throw at what time? Who heard the comment about you people and when? Who had photos and videos? Kevin added that his neck was still swollen and attached a picture. Katie wrote down everything about the door handle. David added screenshots of the weather showing it was already 95 degrees outside when Miss Brenner turned up the heat. Everyone was comparing what they remembered and making sure we had the same story. That afternoon, the hospital phone in my room rang. It was Faye Baxter, the school nurse. She wanted to document my allergy history for her records. She mentioned she'd been warning about the EpiPen access problem for 2 years. She had emails to prove it. She told Mom she'd put everything in writing and suggested we request my full health records from the school. Her voice sounded tired but also determined, like she'd been waiting for something like this to happen. Something's not adding up here. Why would a teacher throw a rock at a wasp nest when kids are already getting stung? Miss Brenner's behavior feels so extreme, it makes me wonder what's really driving her actions in that classroom right now. She gave us her personal cell number and said to call if we needed anything. 2 days later, they released me from the hospital and I had to go back to the school. The biology room had yellow tape across the door like a crime scene. Every buzzing sound made me freeze in the hallway. A fly went past my face in English and I dove under my desk. Kids stared at me. Some girl's phone vibrated in her pocket and I jumped so hard I knocked my books off my desk. All I could think about was where the exits were in each classroom, how fast I could get to them, whether the windows opened. Nurse Baxter called me to her office during lunch and took photos of the welts that were still visible on my arms and neck. She had me fill out an official incident report, asking for every detail I could remember. She made 3 copies on the copy machine, one for us, one for her official files, and one she locked in her personal filing cabinet. She looked around like she was checking for cameras, then leaned in close. She whispered that she didn't trust the main office with evidence because things had a way of disappearing. The next morning, I walked into biology and froze. A substitute teacher sat at Miss Brenner's desk with all the windows sealed shut with duct tape. She kept checking the windows every few minutes like something might break through. Only half the class showed up and everyone whispered about Miss Brenner being on administrative leave but still getting her full paycheck. My chest burned, knowing she was sitting at home getting paid while we had to come back to this room. Katie moved her desk closer to mine and kept watching me like I might collapse again. The substitute passed out worksheets with shaking hands and didn't make eye contact with anyone. Kevin had bandages on his neck from the wasp stings. 3 empty desks belonged to kids still in the hospital. The counselor appeared at the door and pointed at me to follow her. Her office smelled like vanilla candles and she had motivational posters everywhere about believing in yourself. She sat down and folded her hands on her desk while I picked at a loose thread on my jeans. She said Miss Brenner suggested we all experienced mass hysteria from seeing one wasp and that teenagers can convince themselves of anything. I stared at her until she looked down at her papers. I asked if mass hysteria causes anaphylaxis and shows up on medical tests. She shuffled more papers and didn't answer. She said she just wanted to check how I was processing everything. I stood up and left without asking permission. That afternoon, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Someone had posted about the incident on Facebook and it was spreading everywhere. Messages flooded in from strangers calling me brave and others calling me a liar who wanted attention. One person said I ruined a good teacher's career over nothing. Another threatened to find out where I lived. Mom grabbed my phone and changed all our privacy settings, but screenshots were already spreading. I felt like everyone in town was watching me and picking sides. That night, Mom cleared the kitchen table and pulled out a yellow legal pad. She said we were filing formal complaints for discrimination, safety violations, and attempted assault. We stayed up until 2 in the morning writing down every single detail while it was fresh. Mom typed on her laptop while I drew diagrams of where everyone was sitting. Her hands shook with rage as she typed about Miss Brenner throwing the paperweight at the nest. She printed 3 copies of everything and put them in separate folders. The next afternoon, kids from my class started showing up at our door with their parents. Katie brought 3 pages of handwritten notes and a drawing showing exactly where everyone sat and where the wasps came from. David's statement mentioned hearing Miss Brenner say, "your people," twice before the wasp incident. Kevin wrote about her refusing to let them close the windows. Every parent looked angry and wanted to help. Mom organized all the statements by date and had everyone sign them in front of each other as witnesses. We had 17 statements by dinner time. Mom's phone rang and it was Kelsey Barron's secretary saying the assistant principal wanted to meet with us. Mom hung up and immediately started preparing like she was going to war. She printed every email, organized all the medical records from the hospital, and put everything in a huge binder with labeled tabs. She made me practice staying calm even when I wanted to scream about what happened. We agreed I would tap the table 3 times if I needed to leave the room. She bought a new voice recorder and tested it 5 times. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 10. We arrived 15 minutes early and sat in the waiting area. Barron kept us waiting for 20 minutes past our appointment time. When she finally called us in, she had the principal and someone from the district office with her. Mom placed her phone on the table with the recording app clearly visible. Barron's eye twitched when she saw it. She started talking about patience and discretion while they investigated. She strongly suggested we shouldn't post anything online that might complicate matters. She used air quotes around the word investigated. Mom asked if she was suggesting we stay quiet about a teacher who caused multiple hospitalizations. Barron said that wasn't what she meant, but we needed to think about the bigger picture. The district person kept taking notes but never looked up. Mom asked for copies of their investigation timeline, and Barron said that wasn't public information yet. We left after 30 minutes with nothing resolved. That evening, Mom's phone dinged with an email from Ash Ayala. He'd sent his official incident report describing finding me cyanotic and barely responsive when he arrived. His report noted Miss Brenner was aggressively dismissive of the medical emergency and tried to prevent him from treating me. He wrote that she claimed we were all faking for attention, even while multiple students showed obvious allergic reactions. Mom printed 5 copies copies and added them to our growing file. Having official documentation from the actual paramedic who saved me felt like armor against everyone calling us liars. Mom started requesting records from everywhere. She filed a formal records request for the maintenance logs from the school. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived. She spread the papers on the table and found it. 4 months ago, someone reported the broken windows in the biology room as a safety hazard. The work order was marked non-priority and never completed. There were 3 follow-up requests that were all ignored. Mom's face went white and she had to sit down. This could have been prevented if they'd just fixed the windows. Nurse Baxter called and asked to meet with us privately at a coffee shop downtown. She looked around nervously before sitting down. She explained the EpiPen cabinet required 2 staff members with different keys to open it. Even in an emergency, it took minimum 5 minutes to access. She'd been fighting to change this policy since a student almost died 3 years ago. She pulled out a folder of her own emails and requests that were all denied. Her frustration matched ours perfectly, as she showed us email after email of her begging them to change the policy. The next day, Mom's phone started buzzing non-stop with emails from someone named Lynette Berger, who turned out to be the district risk manager. She wanted copies of everything we had, including medical records and witness statements, and kept warning about potential legal ramifications of public statements. Mom forwarded every single email to her lawyer friend who'd been helping us for free. The emails kept coming every few hours, demanding all communication go through her office now, and threatening consequences if we talked to anyone else about what happened. Mom printed them all out and added them to our growing folder of evidence. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin saying his parents were pulling him from the witness list. Someone had called them suggesting it might affect his college recommendations if he got involved in this mess. 2 other kids from class sent similar messages saying their parents didn't want them testifying either. The group chat we'd started after the incident went quiet as more kids stopped responding to messages. Everyone was scared now. Walking past the science wing the next morning, I heard buzzing from a broken fluorescent light and dropped straight to the floor. My whole body went cold and I couldn't breathe right. Jamal found me curled up against the lockers and helped me to the nurse without asking any questions. He kept talking about his new video game and the math test and anything except wasps while we walked. The nurse taught me this grounding technique where I had to name 5 things I could see, which were the poster on her wall and the Band-Aid box and the sink and the clock and her coffee mug. Then 4 things I could hear, like the air conditioner and kids in the hallway and the phone ringing and Jamal tapping his foot. Then 3 things I could touch, which were the paper on the bed and my backpack strap and the cold metal rail. It helped a little, but my hands were still shaking when I left. The counselor called me in during 4th period and suggested again that I should let the adults handle this. She said holding on to anger wasn't healthy, and maybe I should consider forgiveness for my own peace of mind. I stood up and walked out without saying anything because there was nothing to say to that. That afternoon, an anonymous email showed up with screenshots of 3 previous complaints about Miss Brenner. One was an asthma attack where she told the kid to stop being dramatic until he passed out. Another was a diabetic episode where she refused to let the student eat their glucose tablets. The third was another allergic reaction to peanuts where she made the kid wait 20 minutes before calling the nurse. Nurse Baxter's locking evidence in her personal filing cabinet gives off serious, "I've seen some stuff go down here" vibes. She's basically running her own secret witness protection program for paperwork at this point. The sender said they were afraid to come forward, but thought I should know I wasn't the first. Mom immediately forwarded everything to our lawyer contact. Mom filed a formal records request for all of Miss Brenner's personnel files and disciplinary history the next morning. The district responded within hours, saying it would take 30 business days to process due to unusual volume of requests. We both knew they were stalling, but there wasn't much we could do except wait. A leaked maintenance report showed up in our mailbox with no return address. It showed the door handle in the biology room had a known defect that made it easy to break if pulled hard enough. The repair was scheduled for next semester due to budget constraints. There was a note in the margin dated 3 months ago that said teachers had been notified about the issue. Miss Brenner definitely knew about it when she yanked that handle. At the school board meeting that week, I stood at the podium for public comment with my voice shaking so bad I could barely read my notes. I only got 3 minutes, but I made them count, describing how I nearly died while my teacher watched and smiled. I made sure to mention the part about your people and how she threw a rock at the wasp nest on purpose. Several board members wouldn't make eye contact with me, and one actually got up and left during my speech. The next morning, I got called to the office and handed a disciplinary notice for misuse of safety equipment regarding the fire alarm. They said I'd endangered other students by causing unnecessary panic, even though it literally saved my life. Mom went nuclear and called the superintendent's office demanding an immediate meeting. She used words I'd never heard her say before, and her face turned red while she yelled into the phone. By lunch, the notice had mysteriously disappeared from my file, and the vice principal said there must have been some kind of misunderstanding. Mom and I spent that evening researching the state education code online. We found the exact statute that said activating a fire alarm during imminent danger to life was explicitly protected. We printed out 15 copies and highlighted all the relevant sections with a yellow marker. We made a whole binder with tabs for different sections of the code that applied to our situation. Knowledge felt like power returning after weeks of feeling helpless. The binder kept growing thicker as we added more evidence and more laws that had been broken that day in the biology room. 2 days later, the district sent someone to pull kids out of class one by one. My friend texted me that they made her cry with their questions about whether she might have misunderstood what happened. Another classmate said he refused to answer anything without his mom there. The woman interviewing them kept asking if maybe Miss Brenner was just trying to teach us about nature, or if we were being too dramatic about normal wasp behavior. She had this fake concerned look while writing notes that I could see from the hallway when kids came out looking upset. 3 students from the room next door ended up writing statements about hearing all the screaming and seeing wasps flying into the hallway after they got into our classroom. Their teacher wrote her own statement saying she called the office for help but got told to just keep teaching like normal. The pile of evidence kept getting bigger and bigger. The paramedic who saved me sent over this detailed medical report that described everything wrong with me when he got there. He wrote about my lips being blue and foam in my airways and my blood pressure being so low he could barely find it. He put in writing that if he'd gotten there even 1 minute later, I probably would have died. Mom made copies of that report and framed one for our wall at home. Word got around school that Miss Brenner was on paid leave while they investigated everything. Half the teachers looked at me with sympathy when I walked by, but the other half acted cold and wouldn't even make eye contact. chat. You could tell which teachers thought I was making trouble and which ones understood what really happened. The divide was so obvious that kids started noticing which teachers sat together at lunch now. The local news lady ran a segment about safety concerns at our high school without saying anyone's name directly. They showed footage of our classroom with the windows and close-ups of what was left of the wasp nest outside. My phone buzzed all evening with messages from people who recognized our school, even though they tried to blur the signs. Mom spent hours on the phone with the Office of Civil Rights filing a discrimination complaint and another one with the state about my 504 plan being violated. The intake person said these investigations usually take 6 to 18 months to finish. That timeline felt impossibly long when I just wanted this to be over. The district risk manager called Mom to suggest a restorative justice circle, where I would sit in a room with Miss Brenner to heal and move forward together. I told Mom I'd rather eat actual wasps than sit in a room with that woman. Mom was more professional in her response, but basically told them the same thing. Someone slipped a note into my locker that said snitches get stings with this crude drawing of a wasp on it. I took it straight to security, but they said without cameras in that hallway there was nothing they could do about it. The helplessness felt exactly like being trapped in that classroom all over again. At lunch, a group of students brought this petition with 200 signatures asking for better emergency protocols and EpiPens in every classroom. The girl who organized it had been one of the kids who got stung that day. It felt better knowing other students were fighting for change instead of me doing it alone. The teachers' union put out this statement about due process and not rushing to judgment that didn't mention student safety even once. The community Facebook groups exploded with arguments between parents taking different sides. Some people said Miss Brenner was a dedicated teacher being railroaded, while others shared their own bad experiences with her. I stayed off social media completely because reading the comments made me feel sick. Mom kept adding more papers to our binder and highlighting more sections of education code that had been violated. She found regulations about emergency medical procedures and discrimination laws and safety requirements that the school ignored. Every new piece of evidence made our case stronger, but also made me angrier about how many rules they broke. The principal sent out a letter to all parents about reviewing safety protocols, but never mentioned what actually happened or apologized to anyone. Kids in my class started sharing their own stories about times Miss Brenner had been cruel or refused to help them with legitimate problems. One boy said she wouldn't let him use his inhaler during an asthma attack because she thought he was faking. Another girl said Miss Brenner made fun of her stutter in front of the whole class. The stories kept coming, and each one made me realize this wasn't just about me. More teachers started avoiding me in the hallways, and I heard whispers about troublemakers and attention seekers when I walked past the teacher's lounge. Even teachers I used to like seemed different now that I was the kid causing problems for one of their own. The whole school felt divided into camps, and I was stuck in the middle of it. Mom started getting calls from other parents whose kids had problems with Miss Brenner over the years. They shared documentation and old emails and recorded conversations that showed a pattern of behavior going back years. We added everything to our growing collection of evidence. The superintendent announced they were conducting a thorough investigation, but wouldn't comment on personnel matters. That was their way of saying they wouldn't tell us anything about what was happening with Miss Brenner. Kids kept asking me if I was going to sue the school, and I didn't know what to tell them because Mom was still meeting with lawyers. The whole situation felt like it was spinning out of control and getting bigger than just what happened in that classroom. 3 days later, Mom took me to the grocery store because we needed food, and she thought getting out would help me feel normal again. The freezer section had those old lights that buzzed, and the second I heard it, my whole body locked up. My chest got tight and I couldn't breathe, and the basket fell out of my hands and oranges rolled everywhere. I ran outside and collapsed by our car and couldn't stop shaking. This old lady found me there gasping for air and sat down right on the dirty ground next to me. She held my hand and counted with me until Mom came running out with security behind her. The whole parking lot was staring at me like I was crazy, and that made it worse. Mom drove me straight to the school nurse's office even though it was Saturday because Nurse Baxter said she'd meet us there. She spent over an hour showing me how to use the practice EpiPen over and over until my hands stopped shaking when I held it. She taught me this thing where you name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. We practiced it until I could do it without thinking. She typed up this long letter saying I needed to carry my phone and EpiPen everywhere at the school for medical reasons. She printed 3 copies and signed them all with her license number and everything. Mom took the letter to the district office Monday morning and sat there for 4 hours until Kelsey Barron would see her. Barron read the letter and said they'd allow the EpiPen, but the phone policy was district-wide, and they couldn't make exceptions for one incident. Mom asked what would happen if I needed to call 911, and Barron said teachers have phones for emergencies. How did that anonymous sender even know about other incidents with Miss Brenner? The timing of all these documents showing up, the maintenance report, witness statements, it's like watching puzzle pieces click together in the most interesting way possible. Mom pointed out that Miss Brenner had a phone and didn't use it, and Barron just kept saying policy is policy. I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted blood because I wanted to scream at her stupid face. Tuesday afternoon, the principal called Mom and said someone found security footage from the outside camera that shows the whole thing. You could see Miss Brenner pick up something from her desk and throw it right at the nest. The video was clear enough to see her arm motion and everything. Mom asked for a copy, but they said it was part of an ongoing investigation and couldn't be released. Wednesday, the district sent a letter saying the video quality was too poor to be conclusive about what happened. Mom watched it herself in the principal's office and said you could see everything clear as day, but they kept saying it was inconclusive. My disciplinary note for pulling the fire alarm got removed from my file, but they put in a letter of caution about following proper emergency procedures. Mom wanted to fight it, but our lawyer said we had bigger battles and this was actually a win. The compromise made me want to throw up because they were still blaming me for saving myself. Thursday, Lynette Berger from the district called Mom about a possible resolution. She talked about policy changes and sealed records and said there could be a modest payout if we signed an NDA. Mom asked how much modest meant and Berger said around $15,000. Mom said she needed time to think about it. I heard her crying in her room that night because the medical bills were already at $8,000 and climbing. Part of me wanted to take it just to make everything stop, but part of me wanted everyone to know what really happened. Friday morning, someone posted the security video online with a caption, "Teacher attacks students with wasps." It had 3,000 views in 2 hours before the district got it taken down. They sent out an email threatening legal action against whoever leaked it. I didn't do it, but I was was so glad someone did. People started sharing screenshots before it got deleted, and the whole town was talking about it. That afternoon, Miss Brenner's supporters made their own Facebook group called Support Our Teachers. They posted this long statement about how she was victimized by hysterical students and helicopter parents. They kept talking about her 30 years of service like that made it okay to throw rocks at Wasps. They said kids today are too soft, and back in their day, teachers had real authority. Reading their posts made me so mad, I threw my phone across the room and cracked the screen. Mom found me punching my pillow and just held me while I cried from pure rage. Monday, the school board announced they were bringing in an independent investigator named Bram Bender to review everything. People said he was really good at his job and didn't take sides. For the first time since this started, I felt like maybe someone would actually listen. He called Mom Tuesday and set up an interview for Thursday. I spent Wednesday night organizing everything we had into a binder with tabs and labels. Mom helped me print all the emails and documents and photos of my welts. We had witness statements from 12 kids and 3 parents who saw me after. Thursday morning, Bram Bender showed up with a recorder and notebook. He was younger than I expected and actually looked at me when I talked instead of at his papers. We sat at our kitchen table for 2 hours going through every single detail. He asked about the window pole, and I showed him the photo David took of it locked in her drawer. He asked about the EpiPen, and I explained how the nurse's office was locked during class. He asked why Miss Brenner would do this, and I told him about her comments about my people and how she'd been failing certain students all year. When I showed him the binder, his eyebrows went up and he actually said, wow. He went through every page taking notes and asking questions. He thanked me for being so organized and said it would really help his investigation. After he left, Mom said he seemed shocked by some of the evidence, and that was a good sign. Over the next 2 days, Bender talked to pretty much everyone who was in that classroom. Katie found me after school and told me he'd asked her really specific stuff about what Miss Brenner said about my people and exactly how she broke the door handle. She said he wrote down every word and asked her to repeat parts 3 times to make sure he got it right. David said Bender wanted to know if Miss Brenner had ever done anything like this before, and when David told him about the time she locked a kid with diabetes in the supply closet during a low blood sugar episode, Bender's face got really serious. Kevin showed him the video he'd taken on his phone that he'd hidden from the school when they tried to confiscate all our phones after the incident. The video showed Miss Brenner throwing the paperweight at the nest, and you could hear her laughing when the wasps started coming in. Bender watched it 4 times and asked Kevin to send it to his official email. Other kids told him about how she'd failed certain students for no reason, and always made comments about where we lived or what our parents did for work. The consistency of everyone's stories seemed to matter a lot because Bender kept nodding and saying things like that matches what others said. 3 days later, Mom got a call from the district office, and they told her Miss Brenner had resigned for personal reasons effective immediately. The email they sent out to all the parents were 2 sentences long and just said it was a personnel matter they couldn't discuss. No apology, no acknowledgement that she'd done anything wrong. Nothing about the 17 kids who got stung or the 3 who ended up in the hospital. The lack of accountability made my chest burn with anger, and I threw my backpack across my room so hard it knocked over my lamp. Mom tried to calm me down, but I could see she was just as mad because her jaw was doing that thing where she clenches it really tight. The next week, the district sent out another email announcing new safety policies, including accessible EpiPens in every building and emergency override capabilities for all classroom doors. They made it sound like they'd just randomly decided to improve things, not like a teacher had almost killed students. The policies were good, but they were the bare minimum and nothing about phone access during emergencies or mandatory training for teachers about medical conditions. Mom's lawyer friend looked at it and said it was progress wrapped in legal protection to avoid admitting fault. My fire alarm discipline got fully expunged from my record, but when we got the updated file, there was still a note about the unusual nature of the incident that required emergency intervention. Mom's lawyer friend said we could fight to get that removed too, but it would probably take years of hearings and appeals and cost more than we had. I was too tired to care about perfect records anymore and just wanted to move on. Mom met with a civil lawyer about suing the district and Miss Brenner personally, but every meeting ended with them pushing an NDA and settlement offer that kept getting bigger. The lawyer said we could get a decent amount if we agreed never to talk about what happened publicly, but Mom kept asking if that was justice or just a payoff. We went back and forth for days about whether making it public would help other kids or if taking the money would let us move somewhere better. Neither option felt like winning because Miss Brenner was already gone, and the system that let her do this was still there. Late one night, I couldn't sleep and realized my promise to destroy Miss Brenner didn't matter anymore because she'd already run away. But the anger didn't go away. It just shifted to the people who'd protected her and the policies that let teachers get away with stuff like this. The assistant principal who'd ignored complaints for years was still there. The district officials who'd shuffled papers instead of protecting kids were still there. The fight wasn't over. It was just different now and bigger than one bad teacher. Mom found a therapist who specialized in trauma and medical PTSD who had an office across town instead of at the school. The first session, I couldn't even talk about what happened without my hands shaking, but she said that was normal. We started with exposure therapy where I'd listen to buzzing sounds for a few seconds at a time while doing breathing exercises. Some days I could handle it and other days I'd have to stop after 2 seconds. The panic attacks were getting less frequent, but I still couldn't be near windows without checking for nests. Progress was slow, but at least it was progress. At the school, the lunch table dynamics completely changed because some kids didn't want to talk about what happened and others couldn't stop talking about it. Sarah, Katie, David, and Kevin formed this tight circle where we'd sit together every day, and we didn't need to talk about Wasps or Miss Brenner because we all knew. The shared trauma bonded us in a way that was hard to explain to anyone who wasn't there. Other kids who used to sit with us drifted away to other tables, and new kids were scared to approach us because of what happened. 2 months after Mom filed the complaint, the Office of Civil Rights sent an official letter acknowledging receipt and estimating a 12-month investigation timeline. 12 months just to investigate something that had witnesses, video evidence, and hospital records. The letter felt both validating because someone official was finally looking at it, but also frustrating because justice apparently moved slower than snails. Lynette Berger called Mom's cell phone directly, which was weird because she'd never done that before, and pressured her to remove the leaked video from wherever it was posted. She claimed it would prejudice the investigation and make it harder to get a fair outcome, but Mom's lawyer friend handled the response. Miss Brenner's sudden resignation for personal reasons feels way too convenient after Bender collected all that evidence. Makes me wonder what deals got made behind closed doors. doors that we're not hearing about? He basically told her to prove we were the ones who posted it since Kevin had sent it to tons of people before the school tried to take phones. The video stayed up and actually spread to more platforms after Lynette's call because someone posted about the district trying to suppress evidence. 2 weeks later, my phone started blowing up during lunch. Someone in our group chat sent a screenshot from a tutoring website showing Miss Brenner's face next to 5-star reviews. She was working 3 towns over at some learning center, teaching kids one-on-one for $60 an hour. My hands shook as I scrolled through her profile where she bragged about 10 years of teaching experience and her special way with difficult students. The screenshot spread through every group chat in minutes, and by the time I got home, there were already parents commenting on local Facebook pages, asking if this was the same teacher from the Wasp incident. I sat at my kitchen table staring at her smiling photo on the website, feeling this sick helplessness that she was still out there with access to kids who had no idea what she'd done. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I opened my laptop and started typing everything that happened, changing names but keeping all the details about the wasps and the broken door handle and how she'd thrown that rock at the nest. I posted it on one of those anonymous story sites where people share their experiences, and within an hour, there were already 50 comments. Some people called me brave, while others said I was probably exaggerating or making it up for attention, but just getting it all out there in my own words felt like taking back some control. The notifications kept coming until Mom saw me crying at my phone and helped me turn them all off, sitting with me while I deleted the app completely. 3 days later, I got an email from the school board announcing that starting next semester, all staff would have mandatory anaphylaxis training, including how to recognize symptoms and use an EpiPen. The email didn't mention our incident, but Nurse Baxter texted me a heart emoji with the words, "You did this." And I actually smiled for the first time in weeks. When school reopened after repairs, I had to walk past the biology room to get to my locker, and my whole body tensed up the first time. The new substitute teacher had covered all the windows with these bright posters of the periodic table and motivational quotes so you couldn't even see outside anymore. I made myself walk the whole hallway without stopping or looking away, counting it as a win, even though my palms were sweating the entire time. Nurse Baxter asked me to join the new student safety committee she was starting, and I said yes, even though it meant staying after school every Tuesday. We worked on emergency response plans and made lists of all the medical conditions students had, so teachers would actually know who needed what kind of help. Writing policies and procedures felt way better than just being angry all the time, like I was actually doing something useful with all this energy inside me. Mom's lawyer friend called one afternoon saying he'd gotten a copy of Bram Bender's investigation report through some legal filing, and it was brutal. The report used words like serious misconduct and negligence, and recommended Miss Brenner's teaching credential be reviewed by the state board. But Mom reminded me that recommendations weren't the same as actual consequences. A week later, an envelope arrived from the district with a check for our emergency room copay and deductible. No letter or explanation, just the check. I used part of the money to buy 3 EpiPens, one for my backpack, one for my locker, and one for my purse, because being over-prepared felt safer than trusting other people to help. Late at night, I'd lie in bed thinking about how justice hadn't come the way I'd imagined it would, with Miss Brenner getting arrested or losing her license or at least apologizing. Instead, it came in pieces like the mandatory training and the safety committee, and that check that didn't even admit fault. She was gone from our school, but still teaching somewhere else. The policies had changed, but probably not enough to prevent something similar, and my trauma was healing, but would never fully go away. The anger still lived inside me next to this weird new strength that came from knowing I'd fought back and survived, even when the adults who were supposed to protect me had failed. I'd wanted to destroy her completely, but learned that sometimes winning means accepting the small victories and using them to build something better. Justice doesn't always come crashing in with stilettos and gavel slams. Sometimes it just strolls in wearing sneakers, showing up as mandatory training sessions and safety committees instead of dramatic courtroom showdowns. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.